The sky hung low and heavy with clouds. A dull sheet of gray stretched endlessly overhead. The trees surrounding the cemetery stood like solemn witnesses, their branches brittle and bare, reaching toward a sky that had forgotten sunlight. Damp leaves clung to the worn paths, and the air smelled of moss and memory. A little girl in a yellow coat moved quietly through the rows of gravestones. The coat was too bright for the setting, a splash of gold in a sea of stone and shadow. But Lucy never minded being bright in dark places. She believed cemeteries weren't for sadness, they're for remembering where love lives the longest. She had once told her grandmother, whose name now rested in carved granite beneath the tree she always loved. Lucy was 7, with wild curls peeking from under her knit hat and a sketchbook, worn soft from use, tucked under her arm. It was her most precious thing, more than her dolls, more than her backpack with the glittering straps. Her grandmother had given it to her, along with one simple instruction: draw the things that people forget to see. She made her way to her grandmother's headstone, a smooth slab shaded by the gnarled branches of an old elm. She sat cross-legged before it, brushing off the leaves that had gathered at its base, and opened her sketchbook to a clean page. The cemetery was quiet except for the distant hum of passing cars, and the low chirp of a single robin that hadn't yet migrated. Lucy began to draw the elm tree first, the twist of its trunk, the way it leaned ever so slightly, like it was listening. It was while sketching the way the branches tangled with the sky that she noticed him. He was tall, taller than her father, and dressed in a dark, expensive-looking coat that didn't quite belong in a place like this. His shoes were polished, though now dirty by the wet grass and gravel paths. He stood still at first, like a statue. Then he moved, slowly, shakily, and dropped to his knees in front of a marble headstone. Dive from her spot near the tree, Lucy could only see the side of his face. But that was enough. She saw the way his shoulders trembled. She saw the way his hand moved to cover his eyes. She heard something like a sob, raw and quiet, but still too loud for the silence around them. She blinked, her pencil frozen in her hand. She had seen people cry at graves before, grandmothers wiping their eyes, fathers placing flowers and whispering things only ghosts could hear. But she had never seen a grown man cry like this. Not loud, not angry, just broken. Like something inside him had snapped in half, and he was too tired to pretend otherwise. Lucy tilted her head and looked harder. There was something familiar about him, though she couldn't quite place it. Maybe it was the way he held himself, like he was used to being important. Or maybe it was the way he seemed like he didn't want anyone to see him like this. But Lucy saw. She didn't move, didn't speak. She just watched as he whispered something to the grave, his lips barely parting. He held a photo in his hand. She couldn't see what it was, but he looked at it like it hurt. Something tugged in her chest. Not sadness, exactly. Something softer, a wanting to understand. Her pencil slipped back into motion almost without her knowing. She began sketching him. The way his coat folded as he leaned forward. The angle of his face. The shadow cast by grief. She didn't know his name or his story, but she knew what broken looked like, and he looked just like page 9. Nicholas Vale had been called many things in his life: genius, tyrant, shark, visionary, but never son. Not really. Not in the way that mattered. That word had faded from his world the day he stopped answering his mother's calls. He stood alone in the graveyard's oldest corner, surrounded by the headstones of people time had nearly forgotten. His mother had requested to be buried here, not among the polished monuments of the city's elite, but beside her parents, under the oak tree she used to climb as a girl. Nicholas had offered to build her a mausoleum. She declined with a laugh and a whisper. "I'm not building an empire, Nicky. I'm going home." The last time he'd heard her voice was on a voicemail. She called during one of his investor meetings, right when his company's stock had jumped 20%. He was too busy to pick up. When he finally listened to the message, it was just her saying she'd made lemon tea and that she hoped he was warm. He never called back. Now, she was a name in marble: Eleanor Vale, beloved mother, fierce heart. Nicholas stared at those words like they were an accusation. A cold wind sliced through his coat. He didn't feel it. The chill was already inside him, bone deep. He hadn't cried at the funeral, not when they lowered her casket, not when the priest recited lines from Psalms. He'd stood in silence, hands clenched, jaw tight, watching his sister Eleanor sob into her scarf while holding her daughter's hand. He hadn't even looked at the little girl, but today, the armor cracked. He had slipped away from his driver and assistant, ignored 3 calls from the board, and made his way back to this place. Without cameras, without handlers, without excuses. It was the photograph that did it. Folded and faded from being kept in his wallet for too long, it showed a younger Ellen a veil, sun-hatted and smiling, holding the toddler Nicholas with cake smeared across his cheeks. His eyes were wide and joyful in the photo, as if the entire world had been safe in her arms. It wasn't just grief that burned his chest. It was shame. "I'm sorry," he whispered, his voice cracking. Then again, louder, "I'm so damn sorry." He dropped to his knees, hand clenched around the photo, forehead almost touching the ground. The world narrowed to silence, save for the wind and the ache in his ribs. He wished she could answer him. He wished he believed in something more than the stock market and the speed of data packets. Unseen behind a stone angel nearby, Lucy watched. Her sketchbook now lay closed on her lap. She didn't know this man's name, but she knew this. Something was shattering inside him, and she had learned to recognize the sound of breaking hearts, even when they made no sound. She rose to her feet quietly, clutching her sketchbook to her chest. Her yellow coat rustled in the breeze, drawing his attention. He turned sharply, startled, his eyes red and wet. "What are you doing here?" he asked hoarsely. Lucy blinked up at him. "I could ask you the same thing," she said simply. He frowned. "You shouldn't be talking to strangers. You shouldn't cry where ghosts can hear you," she replied. He blinked, confused, almost unnerved. Lucy stepped closer, watching him the way some children do, with eyes to knowing for their age. "You said sorry," she said softly. "That's the word people forget to say when it's too late." "Too late?" he repeated. Lucy nodded. "You said it too late, didn't you?" Nicholas looked down at the photo in his hand. "Yes," he whispered. "I think I did." Lucy tilted her head, studying him. "Do you miss her?" He opened his mouth, then closed it. There were no words that felt large enough for what he felt. Instead, he nodded. Lucy sat down on the edge of the nearby stone bench and opened her sketchbook again. "I draw people who hurt," she said. "Want me to draw you?" He stared at her, baffled, but something about her calm, no, her certainty, pulled at him. "You don't even know me." "I don't have to," Lucy said, flipping to a blank page. The sad ones all have the same shadows. He didn't know whether to laugh or cry, so he did neither. He just watched her draw. She sketched in silence, pencil scratching gently. After a moment, she glanced up again. "What's your name?" He hesitated. "Nicholas." She smiled without looking up. "I think I'll call you Mr. Sad Eyes." He almost chuckled. Then Lucy paused, lowered her pencil, and stared directly at him. "You said sorry, but there are 2 words that change everything, if you mean them." He looked at her, something catching in his throat. She waited. And then, quietly, brokenly, he whispered, "Forgive me." Lucy stopped drawing. She stared at him with eyes round and wide, like she'd just heard thunder in a place where there were no clouds, and she turned. Her gaze locked on him in a way that felt ancient, as if she were no longer just a little girl, but a keeper of forgotten truths. Her lips parted slightly. "You said it," she murmured. "You actually said it." Nicholas felt something shift, in her, in him, in the air itself. It was the first crack of a door he didn't know he was standing before. Something was coming, and nothing in his meticulously controlled life had prepared him for what that little girl was about to tell him next. Nicholas Vale had faced down corporate raiders, billion-dollar lawsuits, and boardroom coups. But never this, never the wide, steady gaze of a child who looked at him not like a stranger, but like a story she'd heard before. Lucy hadn't blinked since he'd spoken, "Forgive me," to words that had shattered boardroom ceilings in his mind just moments ago. Words he'd rehearsed endlessly, but never said aloud. And now that he was no longer certain who they were really for. His mother, the ghost he'd been chasing for years, or himself, but it was Lucy's reaction that twisted the moment into something stranger than grief. "You said it," she whispered again, more to herself than to him. Her voice trembled, not with fear, but with recognition. Nicholas blinked. "What do you mean?" Said what? She didn't answer right away. Instead, Lucy stepped back and looked around, scanning the silent gravestones like she was searching for someone else or something else. The wind picked up, cold and sudden, sending her curls dancing around her face. Then she looked up at him, her expression unreadable. "Have you ever been to St. Mary's Hospital?" Nicholas stiffened. Yes, he said slowly, years ago. My mother, she was in and out near the end. Lucy nodded once, as if confirming something only she had suspected. I heard you, she said. His eyebrows pulled together. What? In the hallway, Lucy continued, her voice distant. You were sitting on the floor, talking into your hands. You didn't think anyone was listening, but I was there. I was waiting while my mom talked to the nurses. You said those same words, forgive me, over and over, but no one answered you back. Nicholas went cold. He hadn't remembered anyone being nearby that night. It had been the day they moved his mother into palliative care. The day the nurse told him, gently but firmly, that if he had anything to say, he shouldn't wait. So he said everything, in a hallway, into his fists, too ashamed to say it to her face. You were there? He asked, his voice barely a whisper. Lucy nodded. I remembered your voice, and your shoes. She looked down at his polished Oxfords. No one else wears shoes like that to visit the sick. Nicholas let out a stunned breath. What are the odds? Not odds, Lucy said, shaking her head. Something else. Before he could ask what she meant, a woman's voice called from across the cemetery. Lucy, time to go. Sweetheart. She turned, waved, and then back to him. That's my mom. Nicholas looked past her, and his heart stopped. The woman approaching wasn't just anyone. She was the last person on earth he expected to see in a place like this. Auburn hair, long stride, familiar sadness behind her eyes. For a moment, he thought he was seeing a ghost. Eleanor, he breathed, his sister, the last time they spoke. She had thrown a glass at his office wall and screamed, "You let her die alone." That had been 2 years ago. She'd walked out of his life and apparently taken a piece of it with her. Lucy, sensing the change, tilted her head. You know my mom. He could barely speak. She's my sister. Lucy blinked. Then that makes you. He looked down at her as the realization dawned across her face and his. His throat tightened. She's mine. Lucy took a step back, eyes wide. You're him. The man in the photo in the hallway drawer. The one my mom doesn't talk about. He dropped to one knee, unsure if it was to be at her level or because the weight of the moment collapsed his legs. I didn't know, he whispered. I didn't know you were my uncle. Lucy finished. The one who never came. The word stung more than any lawsuit ever had. He swallowed, jaw clenched. I didn't come because I didn't think I deserved to. Lucy looked at him long and hard. Maybe you didn't, but she did. Eleanor had reached them now. She froze mid-step when she saw her brother kneeling before her daughter, her face tightened with pain. What are you doing here, Nicholas? I came to say goodbye to Mom. Eleanor's eyes shone with restrained anger. She said you'd only show up when it was too late. Nicholas bowed his head. She was right. Silence stretched between them like an invisible wall. I didn't know about her, he added, voice cracking as he looked toward Lucy. I didn't know I had a niece. Eleanor crossed her arms, protective. You didn't ask. Lucy stepped between them. He said it. She announced. Said what? Eleanor asked, confused. Forgive me, Lucy said simply. And I think he meant it. Something in Eleanor's face broke. Her anger trembled, not vanished, but weakened. She studied her brother. For a moment, no one spoke. Then Lucy looked up at her mother. Can we come back next week? To the cemetery? Eleanor asked. No, Lucy said, slipping her hand into Nicholas's. To see him. Nicholas looked down at her, stunned. I have more drawings, she said. Ones he hasn't seen yet. Eleanor looked at the two of them. This impossible pairing, born of time, mistakes, and maybe something greater. She nodded once. We'll see. As they walked toward the gates, Nicholas lingered a moment longer at his mother's grave. His fingers grazed the stone. For the first time, the weight in his chest didn't crush. It lifted. He whispered again, thank you. And this time, the wind didn't bite. It carried the words gently, like maybe they were finally enough. 3 days passed. 3 days of silence, interrupted only by the echoes of Lucy's voice. The way she'd said you're him like she was naming a ghost. 3 days since Eleanor had spoken to him at the cemetery, her voice equal parts ice and heartbreak. 3 days since a little girl slipped her hand into his. Like forgiveness could be handed out in the middle of a graveyard. Nicholas Vale sat alone in his Manhattan penthouse, but for the first time in his life, the silence wasn't peaceful. It was accusatory. The view from his floor-to-ceiling windows spanned 100 city blocks, but his mind kept returning to one face, a girl in a yellow coat. Drawing the brokenness he had spent decades hiding, he should have gone back to work. Veiled Technologies was preparing for an IPO restructuring. Journalists were circling his boardroom like vultures. But for the first time, Nicholas didn't care. Numbers couldn't fix what he'd abandoned. Power couldn't buy back what he'd missed also on the fourth morning. He did something entirely unfamiliar. He took the train. He wore no tailored suit, no designer sunglasses, no publicist hovering nearby, just a long coat and his mother's scarf, the one he hadn't touched in years. It still smelled faintly of lavender and chamomile tea. He got off the stops early and walked to a quiet street on the east side of town. Brick row houses, peeling paint, bikes chained to rusted gates. He hadn't seen this neighborhood since he was 17, back when his father still yelled through bourbon-soaked dinners and his mother played piano to drown him out. He found Eleanor's building easily, a small plaque on the buzzer ready veiling her spiky handwriting. He didn't buzz. Instead, he stood across the street, watching from the shadows like a man not yet brave enough to belong. Then the door opened. Lucy emerged, her backpack crooked and her hair into uneven braids. She was wearing the yellow coat again, brighter now in the morning sun, and clutching her sketchbook to her chest. Behind her, Eleanor appeared, keys jangling in her hand. She didn't see him, not yet. Lucy turned as if sensing him. She looked directly at Nicholas, no hesitation, no surprise, just a small, knowing smile, like she'd expected him all along. She pointed across the street, lifting her voice. "Mom." He came. Eleanor's head whipped around. Her body stiffened. For a moment, she looked ready to turn back inside, but she didn't. Instead, she crossed the street slowly, shielding Lucy with her body like a mother does when the past returns before she's ready. "You said you wanted to see her," she said flatly. "Here she is." Nicholas looked down at Lucy. "You remember what I said?" She nodded. "Every word?" He looked at Eleanor, his voice lower. "Can we talk? Just us?" Eleanor hesitated. Then, to Lucy, "Go wait inside Miss Carter's shop. I'll be just a minute." Lucy obeyed, but not before whispering to Nicholas, "Don't say anything you don't mean this time." When she was gone, the air turned sharp. "You have a lot of nerve," Eleanor said, folding her arms. "Showing up here after all these years like we're a family reunion waiting to happen." "I didn't know," he said, stepping closer. "If I'd known Lucy was—" "Oh, don't," she snapped. "Don't act like Lucy is the only thing you didn't know. You didn't know Mom had cancer until her second round of chemo. You didn't know she lost the house until I sold my car to help her. You didn't know because you chose not to." Nicholas flinched. "You're right." She blinked, caught off guard by the concession. "I have no excuses. I chased what I thought mattered, and I left everyone behind, including you." The silence between them wasn't cold now. It was heavy, like they were both standing in the middle of a bridge neither wanted to cross. "She thinks about you," Eleanor said after a long pause, "more than she should. She asks why her uncle lives in the clouds and never comes down to visit." Nicholas's voice caught. "I want to change that. She doesn't need money. I'm not offering money." Eleanor tilted her head. "Then what are you offering?" He hesitated. "Time. Truth. Maybe a second chance." Eleanor's eyes softened, just slightly. "She has questions. About our mom. About our family. She's a strange little thing, always trying to connect the dots no one else can see. I noticed." He said quietly. Eleanor looked away, then back. "You want to spend time with her? Fine. She's always drawing. Take her to the park. Let her draw you again. But don't flinch when she asks you things you're not ready to answer. She doesn't do small talk." He nodded. "I won't flinch." Eleanor looked him in the eyes. "She thinks you're part of something bigger. She says you have pieces of her dreams in your eyes. I don't know what that means." Nicholas felt a chill roll down his spine. "I do," he whispered. She handed him a small envelope. Inside was a drawing, one Lucy had done months ago. It was of a man kneeling at a grave, weeping under gray skies, and it was dated 3 weeks before Eleanor Vale died. Nicholas's hand trembled. "She saw it before it happened," Eleanor said. "She dreamed it. She dreams things sometimes, things she shouldn't know." Nicholas looked up slowly. "Eleanor," he said, "there's something about her, something more than family." Her voice lowered to a whisper. "I know." And just like that, The story he thought he was in, one of grief and regret, shifted. Because Lucy hadn't just seen him at his mother's grave. She had seen him before he ever arrived. And the question now wasn't what kind of man he was, it was, what kind of child was Lucy Vale? The park was almost empty, the kind of quiet only autumn knew how to make. Leaves scraped across the stone path like whispers, swirling in tiny tempests round Lucy's boots as she marched ahead. Sketchbook in one arm, a red lollipop in the other. Nicholas followed, his steps slower, hands buried in the pockets of a coat too thin for the cold. He hadn't worn gloves. Maybe he wanted to feel something. They found a bench near the old duck pond where the water mirrored a sky streaked with pewter. Lucy climbed up onto the bench without invitation and patted the space beside her. Sit, she said. It wasn't a request. Nicholas sat. She flipped open her sketchbook, not to a blank page, but one already filled. It showed the same bench, the same pond, the same scene, except Nicholas was already sitting on it, weeks before they arrived. He stared at the drawing. I drew this after I saw you in a dream, she said calmly. I didn't know who you were back then, just that you looked sad and important. His throat dried. You see people before you meet them, only the ones who are stuck, she said, choosing her words carefully. Stuck people leave bigger shadows in my dreams. Nicholas almost asked what that meant, but stopped himself, because deep down, he knew he was stuck, had been for a long time. Lucy opened her bag and handed him a small bundle wrapped in brown tissue, fragile, folded like something sacred. He unwrapped it. Inside was a photograph, not drawn, not new, a real one, faded, black and white. It was his mother as a teenager, sitting on a windowsill with a boy beside her. He recognized her instantly. But not the boy. Where did you get this? He asked, the edge in his voice unintentional. From the piano bench in Grandma Elena's house. Lucy said, watching him carefully, I found it after she died. Nicholas's hands trembled. The boy in the photo had his eyes, same jawline, same twist of the mouth when trying not to smile. That's not me, he whispered, confused. No, Lucy said softly, it's your brother. Nicholas looked up sharply. I don't have a brother. That's what you were told, Lucy replied. She reached into her sketchbook again and pulled out a second drawing, this one far darker, a room. A boy curled on a hospital bed, machines, tubes, but no face, just shadows where a face should be. I dreamed him before I found the photo, Lucy whispered. He was lonely. He kept calling out someone's name, but no one ever answered. Nicholas felt like the air had been ripped from his lungs. He looked again at the boy in the photo, the way he leaned toward Elena, the way her hand reached subtly behind him, shielding his back. There was something there, something maternal and protective and secretive. I would have remembered, Nicholas said quietly. I was there. I grew up in that house. You were sent away a lot, Lucy reminded him. Boarding schools, tutors. Do you remember every summer? He did, or he thought he did, but now flashes. Rooms with closed doors, a spare bedroom no one was allowed into, a conversation cut short when he walked in. His mother crying into the sink once, telling Eleanor they wouldn't understand. Nicholas pressed his palms to his eyes, trying to summon clarity from decades-old shadows. There was another child, he said. My mother, she had another child. Lucy was quiet. She looked down at her lollipop, as if unsure whether she was allowed to say what came next. I think he died, she said softly, but I don't think he left. Nicholas looked up, startled. What do you mean? Lucy turned the sketchbook around. On the next page was a boy, not drawn in her usual lines. This one was distorted, blurred in the way dreams are when they're the real. His hands were pressed against something, glass, maybe. And across the top of the page, Lucy had written in her jagged, childlike print, he's still in the house. Nicholas's blood turned to ice. What house? He asked. The old one, Grandma Elena's, the one you sold after she passed. Nicholas sat back slowly, the bench creaking beneath him. The house, he'd barely stepped inside when he arranged the sale, just enough to sign papers, take one last look at the piano, and leave. The realtor had sold it below market. The buyer paid in cash. I never checked the attic, he murmured. Lucy tilted her head. He's waiting. But he's scared. He thinks you forgot him, too. Nicholas stood abruptly. Lucy, How do you know these things? She looked up, calm as the pond. I don't, but they come anyway. He stared down at her, heart-pounding. In that moment, a cold, windless moment beneath the ghost gray sky, Nicholas Vale, billionaire titan of industry, knew something with complete, bone-deep certainty. He hadn't just come back to fix his past. He had come back to face a secret no one living had ever spoken. And whatever was waiting in that house, in the attic, in the memories, in the things left unsaid, it was no longer content to stay quiet. The house sat like a forgotten cathedral, sunken into the earth, wrapped in ivy and secrets. Its wooden bones had weathered storms, funerals, piano music, and long, echoing silences. No light shone from the windows. No wind touched its shutters. Nicholas hadn't stepped foot inside since the day the movers came for his mother's piano. The only thing he kept, the rest had been left behind. Furniture, photos, her favorite cardigan, still hanging on the door when she died. He hadn't stayed long enough to look in the attic, but now he was back, standing on the warped porch with a trembling key in his hand. Lucy beside him, clutching her sketchbook like a shield. Are you sure you want to do this? He asked her. Lucy didn't answer. She just nodded and took his hand. He unlocked the door. The air inside was thick, not just with dust, but with something older, something held in place, like a breath that had never been exhaled. The floor creaked, like it remembered every step his mother ever took. They walked slowly through the foyer. Nicholas's eyes scanned the walls, the staircase, the framed photo of him as a child, untouched. Still slightly crooked, the kitchen door swung open as if inviting them in. He passed it. The attic door stood at the end of the hallway, behind the linen closet. He had forgotten that. Lucy reached out and touched the brass knob. Her fingers hesitated. He's up there, she whispered, but he's afraid. He thinks you're coming to forget him all over again. Nicholas felt his throat tighten. I didn't know he existed, Lucy. But he knew you, she said. Nicholas opened the attic door. The stairs groaned under their weight as they climbed into the dimness. Only one window, covered in gauze like cobwebs, lit in the dying light. The air smelled of paper, cedar, and time. Stacks of boxes, old trunks, and a broken rocking chair littered the space. And in the center of it all, a child's bed. Not a crib, not a toddler's mattress. A full twin-size bed. Sheets faded blue, tucked tightly as if waiting for someone who was just out of school or down for dinner. Lucy crossed the room first. She knelt by the bed and placed her sketchbook on the pillow. Nicholas couldn't move. He looked around at the toys too dusty to play with. The walls adorned with faded wallpaper and drawings taped like offerings. He approached the nightstand. There was a name scratched into it, small and deliberate. James. He whispered it aloud, and the room seemed to exhale. A chill brushed past his neck. He was sick, Lucy said quietly. Very sick. She kept him here because the hospital said he wouldn't last long, but he did. For a while, she made him stay hidden, because of your father. Nicholas turned sharply. My father didn't know. She didn't tell him. She was afraid James would be taken away. Afraid he'd be locked up in some place where no one would love him. His knees buckled, and he sat on the floor. A second son. His brother, alone, hidden, sick, and forgotten by everyone except their mother. And now Lucy. Nicholas looked at the far corner of the room. There, just beyond the rocking chair, was a shadow. It wasn't shaped like a trick of the light. It had form. Still, watching. James, Nicholas said softly, his voice cracking. I didn't know. I swear to you, I didn't know. The shadow didn't move. Nicholas crawled toward the bed, his hand reaching for the nightstand, his other pulling something from his coat pocket. The same photo Lucy had shown him in the park. The one of James and Elena. He placed it on the pillow next to her sketchbook. Then he said the words again, but this time, they didn't sound like a plea. They sounded like a promise. Forgive me. And the light in the room changed. Not brighter, but clearer. Like the air had been cleared of something unspeakable. The shadow near the chair slowly began to dissolve, like mist in morning sun. And just before it vanished completely, Nicholas saw it. The face, pale, soft, kind. His mother's eyes, his own nose, a boy, a brother smiling. Then gone. Nicholas remained kneeling long after the room had settled. Lucy came beside him, her small hand resting on his shoulder. He was waiting for that, she said simply. For what? Nicholas asked, voice hoarse. For you to come home and remember They sat in silence. Below them, the house creaked, but it was different now, less haunted, more settled. Like it, too, had finally let something go when they left the attic. Nicholas didn't close the door behind him. He left it open because James wasn't hiding anymore. 3 months later, Nicholas Vale stood on a podium outside a gleaming glass building with the words "The James Foundation" etched in gold behind him. A foundation dedicated to helping children with rare and terminal illnesses. Hidden ones, forgotten ones. Beside him stood Eleanor. In front of him, Lucy. Her yellow coat replaced by a navy blazer, but her sketchbook still in hand. Reporters asked questions. Why now? What changed? Nicholas leaned into the microphone. I spent my whole life building things that didn't matter, he said, until a little girl reminded me that the things we forget, the ones we hide, never really go away. Then he turned to Lucy and smiled. She taught me that sometimes 2 words can change everything. Epilogue. At that night, back at home, Lucy opened her sketchbook. The last page was blank, except for one small drawing, a boy on a swing, under an oak tree. Smiling. In the corner, she wrote, "He's not stuck anymore," and for the first time since the dreams began, Lucy slept through the night.